Didn't lose Connecticut. Connecticut lost Caitlin Clark.
I completely believe they lost a golden opportunity. You could have got one of those 12 spots. Now look, every woman on that team is deserving.
The player who would rewrite NCAA history never got the phone call she wanted from Geno Auriemma's program. His staff called her AAU coach a handful of times. They never called her, and they never called her family. Years later, that coach questioned whether she was ready for the WNBA, only to watch her silence those doubts with one of the greatest rookie seasons the league has ever seen. Was passing on Clark a calculated basketball decision or one of the biggest recruiting regrets in modern history? Let's uncover the missed call, the controversial comments, and the rise that followed. The call that never came. Every recruiting story has two versions, the one told by the program that won and the one told by the player who got away. This one has both, and they agree on almost everything. Growing up, Caitlin Clark had one program in mind, not Iowa, not any of the dozen schools that would eventually chase her, Connecticut. She has said it plainly, in her own words, years after the fact. She loved the Huskies. She thought they were the coolest place on earth, and she wanted to be able to say she had been recruited by them.
It's not just that she leads D1 with 115 three-pointers this season, or that she's shooting 38.2%.
That is the part most retellings skip. She did not simply prefer Connecticut. She wanted their attention specifically. She wanted the call. It never came. Not to her. Clark has described exactly what did happen. Auriemma's staff phoned her AAU coach a handful of times, a second-hand gesture routed through an intermediary. Nobody from the program spoke to Clark herself. Nobody spoke to her family. For a prospect ranked 4th nationally in her high school class, that is not a rounding error. That is a decision. Auriemma has never denied it. Asked years later why his staff passed on a player who would go on to break the NCAA's all-time scoring record.
Clark, she fires, and it goes! She hit it! Wow!
He did not claim he missed her, or that his scouts overlooked her game. He said he had already given his word to Paige Buchers, the #1 recruit in that same class, and he was not willing to split the backcourt before either player arrived on campus. In his words, it would have been silly to promise Buchers the ball and then go chase a second point guard behind her back. That is a defensible basketball decision. It is also, unmistakably, a choice. Not an oversight, not a missed evaluation, but a program looking directly at Caitlin Clark and deciding someone else came first. What turns a defensible decision into a lingering one is what Auriemma said next. Told that Clark still wanted Connecticut, he did not offer regret. He placed the burden back on a teenager. If she really wanted to come, he said, she should have called him herself. Neither of them lost out, he added. She made the right decision for her. It worked out fine. Consider who was saying that. This is a coach whose entire reputation was built on finding talent before the rest of the sport noticed it, identifying a prospect in a small gym and locking her in years ahead of every rival program. That is the skill that built 11 championships.
For over 3 decades, one name has defined the standard for excellence in college basketball: Geno Auriemma. Coach Auriemma has won 11 national championships, been to 23 Final Fours.
The skill that landed Diana Taurasi, Maya Moore, and Brianna Stewart before other programs finished their first phone call. And in the one recruitment that would go on to matter more than any other in the sport's modern history, the finder of talent waited for the talent to find him. To be fair to the decision itself, the recruiting class Auriemma was navigating that year was unusually deep. Buchers, Clark, Angel Reese, Cameron Brink, and Camila Cardoso would all go on to become first-round talents, national award winners, or both. Betting everything on one player from that group was not reckless. Buchers herself went on to win National Player of the Year.
So on behalf of the Atlanta Tip-Off Club, it is my honor to present the Jersey Mike's Naismith Women's Player of the Year award to Paige Buchers of the University of Connecticut. Congratulations, Paige.
As a freshman, and kept Connecticut in championship contention for years afterward. Auriemma's basketball logic held up fine on its own terms. What did not hold up as cleanly was the explanation he offered once that bet meant walking away from Clark entirely. An explanation that placed the responsibility for her absence on a teenager rather than on the program that chose not to call her. If the basketball logic was sound enough to defend on its own, why did it need a line blaming a 17-year-old for the outcome? Was it a fair basketball trade-off? One dominant guard secured early, rather than two competing for the same position? On paper, yes. But basketball trade-offs do not usually come with a parting line that shifts responsibility onto the player who was passed over. Auriemma did not simply choose Buchers. He told the rest of the country, in his own words, that Clark's absence from stores was on her, not on the program that never called. She left it there. No public rebuttal, no lingering complaint, no interview where she pushed back on his framing. She picked up her recruitment and turned it toward a program 4 hours south that had never won what Connecticut had won, and never come close to it. The choice that changed everything. Iowa was not a consolation prize. It only looked like one from the outside. When Clark arrived in Iowa City, she inherited a program with no recent Final Four pedigree and no built-in national spotlight. What she found instead was space, the chance to be the entire offense rather than one piece fit into an existing system already built around someone else. Over 4 seasons, she turned that space into the most productive individual run women's college basketball has ever recorded. She finished her career as the all-time leading scorer in NCAA history, across every division, men's or women's.
A history-making day in college basketball, Iowa's Caitlin Clark became the leading scorer in the NCAA Division I basketball, woman or man.
She won back-to-back National Player of the Year awards. She led Iowa to consecutive national championship game appearances, something the program had never done before she arrived. How does a program with no recent Final Four history reach 2 championship games in a row within the same 2 seasons? The common variable was obvious to anyone watching a single game. The clearest proof of what she built came in April, in the national semifinal. Iowa and Connecticut met in the Final Four, Clark against Buchers. The 2 point guards Auriemma had once decided could not share a backcourt, now standing on opposite ends of the same court in the biggest game of the season. Iowa won by 2 points. It was close. It was not an accident. And it happened in the exact matchup Auriemma had structured his recruiting class specifically to avoid. The one where his guard and the guard he passed on would settle it directly, with a trip to the national championship on the line. Numbers alone do not explain what Clark's 4 years at Iowa actually did to the sport's attention.
I was torn between the two. I couldn't make up my mind. Like, the amount of conversations we had about it was almost too many in a way, but it's a big decision.
Away games turned into events. Opposing arenas that had never sold out for women's basketball did so specifically because Clark was walking through the tunnel. Television audiences that had ignored the sport for a generation suddenly had a reason to tune in on a weeknight in February. None of that happened because a marketing department decided to promote it harder. It happened because one player, in a program with no built-in audience to inherit, built one from nothing, game by game, season by season. Here is the part worth sitting with. Every advantage Connecticut offered, the banners, the recruiting pipeline, the national spotlight already waiting, is precisely what Clark did not have at Iowa. She generated her own version of all 3 from a program that had none of them in place before she arrived. That is a harder thing to accomplish than inheriting a dynasty already in motion, and it is the thing that made her impossible to frame as simply the next name on a list of great players Connecticut happened to produce. Iowa's rise under Clark was not limited to a single signature win. The program reached back-to-back national championship games, first falling to LSU.
For the final time, the Carver crowd filled the arena to see Caitlin Clark. Clark still chasing a record, looking to become the all-time scorer.
Then to South Carolina, appearances Iowa had not managed in the decades before her arrival. Attendance told the same story from a different angle. Carver Hawkeye Arena, a building that had rarely sold out for a women's game in program history, began doing so consistently during her final seasons, with season ticket waiting lists that had not existed before she arrived. None of that required Connecticut's recruiting network, its television contracts, or its built-in national following. Iowa had none of those advantages waiting for her. Would any of it have happened at a program that already had attention to spare, or does that kind of audience only get built by someone who has to build it from nothing? Clark built the audience the program had never had, using nothing but what she did on the court. By the time Clark was drafted into the WNBA, the record was public and undeniable.
With the first pick in the 2024 WNBA draft, the Indiana Fever select Caitlin Clark.
But the professional sport she was entering had not yet decided how it wanted to talk about her. That conversation would not stay measured for long. The prediction that backfired. On June 6, 2024, less than 2 months into Clark's professional career, Geno Auriemma appeared on The Dan Patrick Show.
We talked to Geno Auriemma before we started our show live.
He was there, ostensibly, to talk about her transition into the league. What he delivered was harsher than a simple scouting opinion. Referencing comments made earlier by veteran WNBA star Diana Taurasi, Auriemma said Clark was on the wrong team, with the wrong skill set to handle the physicality of the league, and that as a rookie, she was in for what he called a rude awakening. Then he went further, aiming not at Clark's game but at the people who had shown up for it. In his own words, the delusional fan base following her,
57 years old, and she's one of the greatest players I've ever seen.
It's a good time. She makes her three, she makes her free throws, she gets logos. It's just really fun to watch.
Had disrespected the league's existing players by claiming she would arrive and immediately tear it apart. The kid, he said, had been set up for failure right from the beginning. It is worth separating what Auriemma was actually arguing from how it landed. His stated point was partly protective, a claim that unrealistic hype, not Clark herself, had painted a target on a rookie who would inevitably absorb physical punishment from more experienced defenders. That is a real, and in fairness, not an unreasonable concern for a coach who has spent decades watching young stars get worn down early. But the word he chose to describe the people watching Clark's career was not measured. Delusional is not a word used to protect someone. It is a word used to dismiss the people rooting for them. The reaction was immediate and largely one-sided. Fox Sports personality Nick Wright publicly criticized the comments as badly misjudged, and the framing stuck. Commentators across national outlets pointed out that Auriemma's own words did exactly what he claimed to be warning against, lowering a rookie's ceiling publicly on national radio before she had played 2 full months of professional basketball. Others noted the timing. Clark had just absorbed a flagrant foul from Kennedy Carter days earlier.
The Sky's Kennedy Carter hitting a shot, then heading over to Clark and shoulder-checking her.
An incident already dominating sports media. Auriemma's comments landed directly inside that storm, adding an 11-time national champion's voice to the case that Clark did not belong. Did the criticism have a basketball basis at all? Physicality in the professional game is a real adjustment for any rookie, regardless of college pedigree. That much is simply true, and worth acknowledging rather than dismissing outright. But wrong team, wrong skill set, and set up for failure are not hedges. They are predictions. Public, specific, attributed predictions made by one of the most respected voices in the sport about a player who had not yet had the chance to answer them on the court. Taurasi's original comment, the one Auriemma cited as backing for his own position, came from a 2-decade veteran and multiple-time Olympic gold medalist.
Greatness is often defined by moments, by championships, by victories.
Who had earned the standing to speak on what professional physicality actually demands. Her warning that no amount of college success fully prepares a rookie for what awaits underneath the basket had legitimate grounding. Auriemma's decision to attach an insult to that same point, aimed squarely at the people buying tickets and tuning in, is what separated a fair basketball caution from a public relations problem entirely of his own making. Fans did not invent the comparisons to past legends. Media coverage did. Clark herself, in her early public comments that season, consistently deflected the hype rather than embracing it, telling reporters she simply wanted to play basketball and let her game speak for itself. That detail rarely made it into coverage of Auriemma's remarks, which focused almost entirely on the word delusional and the fans it was aimed at. If Clark herself never claimed to be the sport's savior, whose expectations was Auriemma actually correcting when he used that word on national radio? She would get her chance to answer soon enough. And what happened over the rest of that rookie season did not require a single public response from Clark herself. The scoreboard would do the talking Auriemma had already tried to do for her. The scoreboard answers back. By the end of her rookie season, the numbers had settled the argument Auriemma opened in June. Clark was named the WNBA's Rookie of the Year.
Congratulations, Caitlin. You are the 2024 Kia WNBA Rookie of
Receiving 66 of a possible 67 votes from the national panel of sports writers and broadcasters who decide the award, as close to unanimous as the honor gets. She was named to the first-team All-WNBA, the league's official recognition of its 5 best players at any position, regardless of experience. And in most valuable player voting, against a field stacked with established veterans who had years of professional seasoning she did not yet have, she finished 4th. How does a rookie with the wrong skill set finish 4th in a most valuable player race built almost entirely out of proven veterans? Nobody who made that original prediction ever had to answer it. Set those results next to what had been said about her in June. Wrong team, wrong skill set. Set up for failure. None of it held. A rookie supposedly mismatched for the league's physicality finished her first professional season as one of its 5 best players. Full stop. Ahead of players who had spent a decade adjusting to exactly the kind of contact Auriemma warned she could not handle. The individual numbers back up the honors. She averaged roughly 15 6/10 points, 6 4/10 assists, and 5 1/10 rebounds per game across her rookie year.
I like butter on my bread. we knew where you were going. Some preserves.
Caitlin Clark, 3 for 3 from outside.
Numbers that would be respectable for a seasoned veteran, let alone a player less than a year removed from college basketball. She led the Fever to their first playoff appearance in nearly a decade, a franchise turnaround that had nothing to do with luck and everything to do with what she had built at Iowa, translating directly to the professional level. Indiana's opening postseason game drew close to 2 million television viewers, and the second game in that series drew roughly 2.5 million, a cable broadcast record for the league at the time. What produces 2.5 million viewers for a franchise that had not sniffed national relevance in nearly a decade? Not a marketing department, a single rookie who was supposed to struggle. Those are not numbers a mismatched player produces. Those are numbers a franchise builds an entire business plan around. Here is the part that separates this from an ordinary bad take. Auriemma is not an outsider guessing at a sport he does not know. He has coached more elite women's basketball talent than almost anyone alive. When a coach with his resume questions whether a player can handle a league's physicality, that carries weight specifically because of who is saying it. Which means the gap between his prediction and Clark's actual rookie season was not just a miss, It was a miss from the single voice in the sport least likely to be wrong about exactly this kind of evaluation. The first-team All-WNBA selection carries a weight that gets lost in casual conversation.
All-star starters. Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, and Kelsey Mitchell were all selected as starters. It's the third straight year all three have made the All-Star team.
It is not a rookie award, and it is not adjusted for experience. It measures a player directly against every other player at every position in the league that season, regardless of how many years they have logged on the court. A first-year player earning that distinction, in the same season the sport's most decorated coach said she could not survive the league's physicality, is not a marginal contradiction. It is close to the most direct rebuttal the sport's own award structure could produce. Add the playoff audience numbers to that picture, and it sharpens further. A franchise with no recent postseason relevance, suddenly commanding a national television audience the league had not drawn in years, built almost entirely around the same rookie Auriemma had flagged as mismatched for the moment. When the record book answered, a single bad prediction is forgettable, a pattern is not. In the seasons after his Dan Patrick Show comments, Auriemma kept returning to the subject of Caitlin Clark, unprompted, across podcasts and press conferences that had nothing directly to do with her. On one appearance, discussing how she connected with fans,
she just really inspired me to do whatever I want, and I can do it because she's just amazing at what she does.
He pivoted into an explanation of why other players in the league were physical with her on the court. Because in his telling, she talked plenty of trash herself and simply received the same energy back. On another, well over a year removed from his original comments, he was still explaining what he meant by delusional, still clarifying that Clark herself never claimed to be a savior for the sport, still working to draw a distinction between her actual behavior and the hype that surrounded her. That distinction might even be fair. But notice what it required. A Hall of Fame coach, more than a year after the fact, still explaining himself about a player his program never bothered to call. By the following season, media figures were actively resurfacing his original comments.
Are stars in other places in the country, and clearly Caitlin's been a phenomenon this year. And that's great for the sport. Look, 12.3 million people watched.
And replaying them against updated footage of Clark's continued dominance. Barstool Sports founder Dave Portnoy was among those who publicly mocked the resurfaced quotes online. This was not manufactured outrage, it was simple juxtaposition. Auriemma's own words from that June broadcast, placed next to what Clark had actually done since. Commentators did not need to editorialize heavily. The contrast did the work on its own. Why does a coach with his resume keep engaging with a topic that keeps working against him? One read is simple stubbornness, a refusal to let an old comment go unexplained. Another, less charitable, is that Clark's continued relevance keeps forcing the subject back into rooms where he is asked to react to it, whether he wants to revisit it or not. Either way, the pattern repeats. He speaks. The comments resurface. The scoreboard, once again, has already answered. As recently as this past summer, more than 2 years after his original remarks, Auriemma was still fielding questions about Clark's impact on the sport, telling one interviewer,
what an impact Caitlin had on the WNBA, just in terms of everybody around the country knowing what the WNBA was, knowing who the Indiana Fever,
that much of the ongoing conversation around her had been drawn along political lines rather than basketball ones. He was still explaining that she had involuntarily become a symbol larger than herself, still pushing back on the idea that every foul called against her carried some larger cultural meaning. The fact that a coach with 11 national championships is still being asked to clarify a comment from that first Dan Patrick Show appearance says as much about its staying power as anything Clark herself has done since. There was never a single dramatic confrontation, no press conference walkout, no viral clapback, no public feud with a clean beginning and a clean end. What there was instead is quieter and, in its own way, more permanent. A program that decided a generational talent was not worth a phone call, a coach who predicted her failure on national radio, and years of a record book that never stopped contradicting him. He built his name finding players before anyone else could see them coming.
They're going to act like they're really good players. You see it all the time. You see it at every AAU tournament, you see it every high school game.
In this one case, the player he never called became the one he could not stop talking about. None of this makes Auriemma a villain in the conventional sense. He is not accused of fabricating anything here, and every quote attributed to him in this breakdown is a matter of public record, delivered in his own words, on air, under his own name. That is precisely what makes the pattern notable rather than dismissible. What does it say about a prediction when the person who made it cannot stop returning to explain it years after anyone asked him to? This is not a case of comments taken out of context by an aggregator chasing clicks. It is a Hall of Fame coach, on the record, across multiple platforms and multiple years, repeatedly returning to a player he once decided was not worth a personal phone call, and repeatedly finding himself on the wrong side of what she went on to do with the opportunity he passed on. One phone call his staff never made. One prediction that never held. Geno Auriemma passed on Caitlin Clark, then told the country she had the wrong skill set to survive the WNBA. The record book had other plans. Rookie of the Year, first team All-WNBA.
Pretty impressive for Caitlin to win Rookie of the Year in a dominant fashion when it is going to be one of the great rookie classes in the history.
Fourth in MVP voting, her first season. Years later, he is still explaining those comments, still asked about a player his program never called. That is not a rivalry. That is a scoreboard that never stopped answering. If this changed how you see that decision, drop your take below. Like this video, and subscribe to the channel for more breakdowns like this one.